Patrick, thanks so much for joining us. It's the last night of the conference here, and of course we're standing outside at the Occupy movement. Why are you here, and why do you think that the conference is going the way it is inside?
Well, I think this is the future, in spite of the fact that we're a small and motley band of occupiers, and across the road is the fancy Hilton and the International Convention Center, full of probably quite self-congratulatory people within coming hours, slapping each other on the back. Hey, it's a deal. You pollute more, I pollute more. You know, that's the sort of spirit. And that's the end of the world. I mean, that's a guaranteed genocidal, ecocidal outcome that we're going to be known for here in Durban. And I've lived here 7 years, and I find it a travesty that the name of the city is smeared by the Conference of Polluters, really. That's my personal sense of anger. But, you know, I also am relaxed here because these are all activists who are going to be here for years, for decades. That's what it'll take. And I've seen this before in this very spot, fighting AIDS, and the people who fought for AIDS medicines were also a small motley band. They were beleaguered by stigmatization locally, and then they had to fight the US government, the South African government, the big pharmaceutical companies, the WTO, but they won. You know, 10 years ago it would have cost $15,000 a year to get AIDS medicines. Now it's free. So we take some heart that even in this post-apartheid period, activists can come up against all kinds of socioeconomic and now environmental oppressions. And if we're solid with the argument and we're committed and we're going to go local to the sites where emissions are intense, where we can change the production systems, consumption systems, agriculture, our transport can be made public, we can do much different things with energy. That's where I think the climate justice movement is going to be. And anybody that had any illusions that you would have had a deal out of this place, given the adverse balance of forces, sabotage from Washington, World Bank financing, carbon markets crashing, that was naive. So I don't think the imminent Durban mandate that basically locks in 4 degrees, and for Africa 8 degrees, and maybe will kill 200 million people, is going to stop people here from recommitting to a militant climate justice struggle.
How do you see the climate justice movement moving forward in light of the failure here in Durban?
Well, the failure is their failure, and our strength is saying we're very principled about the need to confront the emitters, the polluters at source. So keeping the oil in the soil, the coal in the hole, the tar sand in the land. Well, we saw in the US a great victory by those 1,250 people who got arrested at the end of August, early September, to get Barack Obama to delay, hopefully to eventually cancel the Canadian tar sand imports through the Keystone Pipeline. And then you see that all over. I mean, I spent a period in sabbatical in the US and found West Virginia mountaintop removal critics winning and fracking critics winning, and New York and Pennsylvania, and people stopping the expansion of a huge Chevron plant in Richmond, California winning, people in Mesa and the Navajo lands winning against coal expansion, 150 coal-fired plants stopped. So even in the belly of the beast, the worst possible site of real, you know, fossil fuel corporate power that totally control their government in the US, you can win if you really are committed, and you win at the local level, and you build that up, and you even have an environmental protection agency in the US where they've been able to get some fairly substantial victories in, you know, just, for example, using the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, declaring carbon a pollutant. And I think we'll do that in this country. I've been here about 21 years since moving from the US, and I'm very convinced that with this blast of sort of banal, you know, working together, saving tomorrow today, sort of rhetoric we've been hearing from the government, we actually have conscientization. So I know that the people that are South Africans here, like these, you know, low-income kids that are just playing soccer behind us, their electricity will be cut off. I predicted with total confidence because of the coal-fired power plants being built, the 3rd and 4th largest in the world, with World Bank money. And they're not going to get the benefit of those plants. In fact, as the coal-fired power plants go up, their electricity bills are soaring over 100%. And our job is to help link all those issues of electricity, of extreme events. We've got fossil fuel blowing up all over Durban, with oil exploration offshore here, fracking being proposed, and it's linking all of these, linking to the water issues. You know, housing, we lost 1,400 houses last Sunday night in that big rainstorm with 10 people killed. So those climate events, those water and electricity problems that are so crucial to people in their ordinary lives, that are going to be part and parcel of dealing with climate, or food sovereignty, these are things that our job in the next period is just link those issues and take that momentum and energy of protest, more protests in this country than anywhere in the world. But as you could see, we didn't bring enough of the township protesters into the climate debate. And I think that's a good challenge for those of us in Durban. Build on the momentum of that big Global Day of Action March, a great spirit there, and try to make sure that if people do understand that their children's, their grandchildren's futures are genuinely at risk, that they act now and that they connect their local grievances to climate. And I think we can do that. I think we've had a lot of confidence, especially with these visitors, especially this Occupy site. You know, every day at 1, a lot of people came here to learn the horizontality, the democracy, and the spirit of participation. That open mic, it just works so well to flatten out power and take, experts like me and make us ordinary human beings. This is so good for everyone involved. And I'm sure that although these are a lot of international folks who've helped us come to this, especially inside a little bit earlier today, that this spirit remains here even if people are taking off. And what we hope they'll take from Durban is a sense of utter and total critique of the people inside. Because as we saw at the City Hall yesterday, when you go up against your president, as some South African activists did, and they bravely held up signs saying, "Don't sell out Africa." Well, the president has thugs, and we saw them beat up 3 of the leading climate justice activists. And that's a statement that says this is the stuff of genuine class struggle and social struggle, gender struggle, race struggle. And if there's a little confusion now because there's a popular president in his hometown and he has a few thugs around him, there's a lot more confidence from people saying, if that's what they're going to have to do, kind of green fascism to promote some kind of green capitalist economy, well, we're going to be fighting that too.
One of the things that maybe differentiates the climate justice struggle from previous justice struggles is there's an absolute time limit on the science, really, by the date you have to win. Do you think you can win in time?
It's such a good question, because our experiences in 2 big struggles here, anti-apartheid, which seem to go on and on and on. And in 1990, it was such a surprise that F.W. Clerk, the white president, released Nelson Mandela, unbanned the ANC, the Communist Party, the trade unions were protesting, community groups, the civics, the churches. But we didn't think that apartheid could be eradicated from the books in 4 years. Well, it turned out it was a trick. They replaced racial apartheid, as you see, with class apartheid. But then we won the struggle to get AIDS medicines away from intellectual property. The most powerful thrust within world capitalism is privatizing our ideas, our commodifying knowledge. And to take AIDS medicines and say, no, we're going to make those free so that millions of people can live. That happened very quickly, maybe 4 or 5 years of struggle to get that incredible victory. So you really never know about the tempo. We do know that if you act too fast, you act like tick, 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 because we're going to run out. You might get some false solutions. And that's what we got in Kyoto. In 1997, we got carbon trading, which now appears to have been a giant waste of 14 years since these carbon markets have crashed and they've been unjust, they've been corrupt and fraudulent. And so now we've really got to say, okay, instead of carbon markets, the sort of central strategy of green capitalism, we've got to look at an eco-socialist approach, which is to cap from above. The governments have to cap, like they did the Montreal Protocol with chlorofluorocarbons. 1987, they stopped that ozone hole from growing because they banned CFC. So they're going to have to do that. There's no question of that. And then from below to transform all these systems that are so addicted and are so unfair and have created such inequality and are controlled by bankers who are just maniacs. They're running havoc without any concern for long-term life and buen vivir, good living. And those are the things that I think bring everyone together. It's like the WTO in 1999. I don't know if you remember, but pretty much everybody came into that struggle. Like if you were a Democrat, if you were a feminist, if you were environmentalist, if you were labor, you all hated this idea that some little mafia in Geneva would just destroy all your laws and set up big corporate controlled free trading systems. And so many people came out, and the WTO never really recovered. I mean, there's a lot of internecine fighting that explains why the WTO is so weak, but I think that's the delegitimization now. It's so sad that the UN now is pretty much like the UNFCCC, like the WTO, illegitimate. failed 16 times, and now a 17th, it very much appears. And so we're going to have to go way beyond UN notions and get out of the box and really make these cuts. And they're going to have to be local and national, because the balance of forces globally, when you have the US sabotaging. And then I think everyone's more or less agreeing now, don't let the US come to these things. Todd Stern, Hillary Clinton, or Barack Obama, these guys are only after expanded US power in a time when they're so profoundly weakened by their own internal contradictions. So sanctions against the US, I think, is going to be one of the key lessons. You cannot let a country like that continue to completely sabotage and destroy any hope that you can get the rest of the governments to agree. And as WikiLeaks showed, their bribery and corruption, their blackmailing, that's just not acceptable. And Todd Stern, as he was told by a young student from Middleburg College yesterday, has just got to be reminded that he's not welcome here. And he got such applause from the delegates. She got such applause when she criticized him. And the reaction to his speech was silence. So, I mean, that's the sort of signal we've got to send. Durban should have been a Washington-free zone. Qatar probably won't be, but anytime you're looking at negotiations that involves Washington these days, expect them to come and lie and steal and cheat and just try and keep them out. That's the other big lesson, I think, from Durban.
And just finally, do you think you'll be able to achieve the kind of structural changes you're calling for with regards to these negotiations without a much broader structural change to the capitalist economy, to our kind of global system?
Well, precisely. Fossil fuel addiction and what's sometimes called a metabolic rift, the way over time we've just been alienated from the environment, and the desperate need to generate a different system that isn't based on profits in the production system and some weird sense of valorization of our souls through consumption of the latest gadgets and commodities. I mean, this is just not a good way to live. To devote more of our time to decent living, fulfilling activities, our families and communities and our society, to democratize the political system so it's not controlled by the dollar as it is now. That's the big challenge for us all, and that means that this small piece of a global struggle for a better world is absolutely connected to the Occupy movement, which has done so much, and to the North African democracy movement, Tunisia and Egypt, that was so impressive, and all over the Arab world, and to the Southern Europeans, now third world in status in Greece and Italy and Portugal and Spain and even Ireland, Iceland, fighting the IMF. It all is coming together. It's the environment for a strong progressive political ecology, and it's the economy for a strong progressive political economy. And I think those of us who do academic work, we're looking more and more for unifying theories that will reconnect society, environment, and a much better arrangement of our economy. And we find them actually on the left in Karl Marx's work, Rosa Luxemburg's tradition. David Harvey, who was my PhD supervisor, brings a lot of this together now. And so it's a beautiful time to actually rethink many things, and lovely that many people come to Durban to help us do that.
When you talk to the negotiators in there, when you talk to Christiana Figueres, the Executive Secretary of the UNFCCC, she'll say that they're working for an unprecedented revolution, something that's never been seen before, and that's why it's taking so long. Do you think she's naive to believe that? Well,
she's a carbon trader. Her background, her elite, her brother certainly put it more appropriately. They should occupy, and the delegates, I hope, listen to Jose Figueres. But for Christiana, she obviously comes from an elite circuitry that has just still within the box, and the box for her was a tradition in which you just commodify the problem and hope that the market sort it out. But I'm sorry, since 2008 the world knows you let financiers get into things like trading carbon, and you bet the planet on that. That's a losing bet. You just do not dare gamble with something as precious as the planet. With Christiana Figueres' perspective, that just takes a little more time, a little more markets. And unfortunately, this Green Climate Fund they're going to announce any moment is so profoundly caught up in for-profit private sector facilities, the World Bank as trustee, revenues coming into it as carbon market revenues, not the climate debt payments from the northern companies and governments. So it's a disaster because it's just one more delay and one more set of false hopes for elites. But nobody's fooled. There's nobody out there who, if you've listened to the talk shows, the radio, talk to ordinary people in this country, this is really seen as an absolute hot air site that does not want to solve the problem. The guys inside here, and a few women at the top as well, are going to be understood, I think, as party to a premeditated genocide. And in saying those harsh words, I'm simply quoting Pablo Solon, who says, look, this deal is a zombie deal. It's Kyoto dead in its soul and its mind, binding agreements, legal orientation that's genuinely locking countries into. They're not going to do that. And serious emissions cut, they're not going to do that. Instead, this is about keeping alive dead and dying and chaotic and crashing carbon markets. And that's ultimately still how a lot of the world's elites want to deal with problems. They just put a Band-Aid on it, hope the market problems can be fixed with the market solution, and it's simply not working.
Patrick,
Thanks, Adam. Yeah,
thank you for speaking to us.